Welcome to a very special snack-sized edition of Brexit Unlocked, the channel that talks common sense and speaks Britain's language. I'm Belinda de Lucy, and I'm here with a very special guest, Ben Habib, the man who is fast becoming the go-to expert on the finer details and nitty-gritty of Brexit. The man with no filter. Welcome, Ben. Nice to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So, look, very tense week ahead with Brexit and the negotiations. Lots of chitter-chatter swirling around that suggests Boris and the government might be buckling to Brussels on Brexit because of the double sort of whammy effect of COVID and no deal on the economy.
Yeah.
Now, you wrote in the Telegraph today that you see a clean Brexit as the solution to all of this. Can you explain why?
Well, I think if we just start by going back a couple of years, you know, we've become sort of incessantly used to this drip feed of Project Fear, making us feel that as an independent country, we'd be unable to get on. And somehow Remoaners, as you might wish to call them, have used the pandemic to accentuate that fear, as if we must now hang on to the coat strings, as it were, of the European Union even more firmly. But actually, if you look at what the European Union regulatory system is, it's deeply bad for business. It's deeply bad for our economy. And what we need to do is cut those regulations as much as possible. We need to diverge from the European Union so that we can actually make laws and regulations which suit the United Kingdom and allow our own economy to flourish, not laws that might suit, for example, Germany or France, or in fact, I don't think it suits any of them, frankly. But, you know, we need the ability to make our own laws, our own regulations, and diverge from the EU so that we can chart an independent course for the United Kingdom.
And of course, with a vulnerable public who are frightened about change, you know, they've got the perfect setup to sort of ram home that no deal is too frightening and scary for anyone to see as a solution. I mean, look, you know, fortune favors the brave, and nothing, rarely is anything achieved from a comfort zone. So I do think the government should be bold. Why do you think they're so scared of a clean break?
Well, the whole no deal Brexit narrative has been hijacked by Remainers, and Project Fear has driven home that message. And I think the other problem here is that the Conservative Party actually isn't ready for no deal. You know, one of the concerns I have with the current administration is that Michael Gove is in charge of no deal planning, and he's famous for saying that actually no deal would be a disaster for the United Kingdom. The minute he was put in charge of no deal planning, he was sending quite a signal to the European Union that we're not prepared to do no deal. And as you and I know, and everyone now knows, if you're not prepared to leave without a deal, you're going to get a lousy one. Mm-hmm. And so I suspect there will be a deal done in the next few days. I suspect it will be a deal that I at least will regard as a bad one. Mm-hmm. It'll tie us into swathes of European regulations, one way or another. I'm sure it will be championed as a fantastic deal, but the reality of it on closer scrutiny will be quite different.
So I've noticed a few tweets from some very strong Brexiteers recently saying, well, is it all that bad if we compromise a little bit on state aid? To me, it's a way the EU can keep its tentacles around our economy, because I don't think they'll use it in good faith. How can you explain how these compromises will be bad for the UK in the long term if Boris does buckle on state aid?
Well, you know, when people talk about making a compromise in a deal, that's around the edges of the grey areas of a deal. But actually, the key issues here, what we're fighting for here, is our sovereignty. We're not fighting for an extra bit of tariff, perhaps, or, you know, greater access to their fishing, dare I might say it. We're fighting actually for our sovereignty, and there can be no compromise on taking back control, as Boris promised he would do, of our laws, our borders, our cash, and our fishing. That is, you cannot compromise on that. So when I heard David Frost a couple of months ago saying, well, we might have to compromise on 40% of our red lines. Well, which bit of sovereignty do you want to give away? Yeah. Which part of the United Kingdom do you want to hand over to the European Union?
And why is it seen as so revolutionary just to want to be an independent nation whose government and parliament makes its own laws? Why is that such a controversial concept for people to be able to handle?
Well, it's a huge, there's a huge answer to that. But there is a large part of our populace who, and I sort of regard them as the woke illiberal elite, who don't have confidence in the United Kingdom, who are desperate to give away our sovereignty to what this greater project, where they see that governance is going to be better, but actually there's no basis for it in history. In fact, these kind of supranational entities inevitably end up failing. The United States being one notable exception, but they have a common culture, common language, common laws and everything. We've got nothing in common with the European setup. We are our own nation with our own laws, our own heritage, and we need to be prepared to stand up and be an independent trading nation and cut those strings with the European Union.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Ben, you tweeted out today that austerity cannot work, that tightening the purse strings isn't the solution. Can you explain why?
Well, austerity doesn't work because you can't grow yourself. You can't diminish debt by constraining the economy. The only way that debt can be reduced is either by repaying it or by the economy relatively growing in size to the debt level. The former has never been achieved by any government. You cannot tax the private sector to the extent needed to pay down the massive debt we've now got. So the only option the government has is to go for growth. And a key component of going for growth is deregulating business. You know, regulations are used in good times to engender kind of social policies that governments wish to enact, to make businesses behave in a particular way because it's for the social betterment of the country, and we can afford to do it at that time. But right now, the United Kingdom, frankly, to all intents and purposes, is knocking at the door of bankruptcy. And we must deregulate business so that it can grow unfettered by, and I'm going to bang on about it again, European Union state aid laws, competition laws, employment laws, environmental laws, and tax laws. We've got to be able to construct a business plan for the UK that allows us to go forward for growth.
Well, that's what the EU is so frightened of, isn't it? It's terrified that we will have that freedom.
Absolutely. And you said it in one of your tweets, Belinda, that actually it's more important to them that we fail than that their economy does well out of a deal with us.
Yeah.
They need us to fail. For them, this is a political project. For us, we're being typically British, which is commonsensical, wishing just to get on with life, be left alone. But they've got a much bigger agenda. And that's why I really fear we might sell out in the next 10 days.
I know. Well, I hope that Boris stands firm against the level playing field. Otherwise, all those solutions you've just suggested are going to be even harder for the UK.
It'll be impossible. You know, if we sign up to EU state aid law, we won't be able to put British business first. We won't be able to have a British procurement for the government. We won't be able to champion British industry. Actually, what we ought to be doing is even bolder than going for no deal. We ought to be imposing tariffs on European Union imports. You know, there is very good evidence that the euro is effectively a subsidized currency. German exports are much cheaper than they should be because of the euro. We have a 100 billion euro trade deficit with the European Union. That is bad for sterling. It's bad for our national wealth. We should be cutting those strings. We should be imposing tariffs on European Union import goods. We should be clearing a big profit on that, by the way. Yeah. And we should be using that to support British businesses.
Well, I was just about to ask you, what would you do if you were Rishi? And you've just laid out the most fantastic plan. You know, if only David Frost had you in his team when he went over to Brussels.
Well, there wouldn't have been much of a negotiation.
Well, you know, at the beginning, I always thought we could just draft a trade deal, hand it to the EU and say to them, take it or leave it. If you want it, great. If you don't, we're off. But unfortunately, I think they've called our bluff a bit. And I think they realised that the Tory government were never keen on a no deal. So never really believed, as you said, that we would walk away. So we were always going to be left with a sort of a fudge.
That's the problem. I mean, the problem is, you know, you've got to make the opponent believe that you're prepared to leave the negotiating table. Actually, I would have left the negotiating table. And that is perhaps the defining difference between our kind of approach and the government's approach. And, you know, I can't tell you how much blame Mrs. May and her administration have to take, because they created the momentum behind this Project Fear. They created this, they allowed the notion that we can't stand on our own 2 feet to be absolutely established. They allowed the notion that we cannot leave without a deal to be disastrous. And Michael Gove, I'm sorry to come back to him, But why is he in charge of no deal planning if he doesn't believe in no deal?
I know, and it's been obvious to us certainly for a long time that that's been the case. And May's apologetic stance to the EU, we felt very much when we were members of the European Parliament in Brussels that the EU were laughing all the way to the bank with May's deal. They couldn't believe their luck. That's where we were a joke, that the fifth largest economy in the world had surrendered this ridiculous treaty that, as Nigel pointed out many times, only countries who had lost in a war would sign up to.
Absolutely.
And very sadly, we've got to the stage where I do think we are still backed into a corner. And I hope, what do you think the chances are that Boris will walk away?
I think they're nil.
No.
If Boris was going to walk away, he would have stuck with his negotiating mandate that he published in February, which stated that if by the end of June we hadn't got a deal, we would make preparations for a WTO exit. He didn't do it. He said he'd put a tiger in the tank of negotiations and try to get something in July. That failed. Yes. Then it went to September. Now we've got the 15th of October. And Boris did try something which I was delighted by, which was this internal market bill that was designed to unpick the Northern Irish Protocol, to get rid of as much as possible, the border down the Irish Sea, and to kick EU state aid law out of Northern Ireland and therefore kick it out of the United Kingdom. And he buckled on that too. When he had the first sort of sign of parliamentary unrest, he kicked it into the long grass by saying, actually, it won't come into fruition before December. And the EU saw him blink on it. And he put himself in an even weaker position by blinking than he would have been if he'd never brought the bill forward in the first place. And so I fear that we're going to get a deal over the next 10 days, and it's going to be a deal that we're going to have to spend the next 5 to 10 years unpicking.
Because it won't be the end of it.
It won't be the end of it.
So many complications. I think it will give the Tory government short-term peace. It will unite the party again. It will help them focus on COVID. But long-term security for the UK, I think, could be put at risk if we allow too many compromises on the level playing field. And also, our coastal communities have been ignored for decades, and this was their one chance that they were finally heard. And I do feel, all of us MEPs have been really strong about sort of batting for the coastal communities because they haven't had much of a platform. No. So I'd be really disappointed if he compromises.
Very, and it's not just emotional, by the way, the fishing. It's not just of totemic importance because, it somehow entered the British psyche that we're an independent coastal state. It's very important. It's economically very important to those coastal communities. That's why the European Union's fighting so hard over it, because they see its value. And I know, again, lots of people in this country who are keener on the EU than I am are saying, well, it's only 0.7% of GDP. Well, actually, it would be a hell of a lot more than 0.7% if we got it back and we used it properly.
There's a reason why it's so little, but the goods are there.
The goods are there.
The source to boost economy for our coastal families is there. Only a fool wouldn't make use of it. We are an island surrounded by water. So that is one area I definitely think Boris needs to stand firm. But again, we will see. Now, is there any credit you can give to the government for improving the deal May got? Is there any hope or positivity you can give our viewers about
we wait and see.
Deal?
We'll wait and see.
Please, Ben, please.
The frank answer is I don't trust what the government is up to with Brexit. And until I can trust the direction of travel, I can't be optimistic because I don't know what they're going to put into the detail. One thing, if anyone from the Conservative government is listening to this, one thing that they should insist on in the deal is a termination provision, a 5-year termination provision or a 3-year or a 10-year termination provision. So if it transpires that the deal is bad, which I suspect it will be, at least it's limited in time. The withdrawal agreement isn't limited in time other than by virtue of the passage of time certain aspects fly, but actually it's in perpetuity. And the political declaration which formed the heads of terms for the future trading agreement, again, doesn't make any suggestion of a limitation in time for how long it would last. And international treaties are virtually impossible to get out of unless there are termination provisions. So if they're going to sell the UK down the drain, if they're going to compromise...
Make it short term.
Make it short term.
Yeah, thank you. Well, wise words, Ben. That is absolutely fantastic. And a last question. Is there anything you'd be prepared to compromise on? Or is it all out or nothing? Are there any areas you'd be, all right, I can understand why the government compromised on that to get a deal?
There is nothing I would compromise on when it comes to our sovereignty, which, just to remind viewers again, as Boris promised in his manifesto, is taking back control of our laws, our borders, our cash, and our fishing. If we compromise on that, we are compromising the United Kingdom.
And that's not something that you or I or many of our viewers would accept. So, you know, Godspeed with Boris and his negotiation team. We all will them and want them to do well. But
very much so.
It's just whether well, the proof will be in the pudding. There's the time to end it. Unfortunately, it was just a little snack bite episode. And Ben, I can't thank you enough for coming on and giving us your wise words. Remember to like and share and subscribe on social media if you like what we're doing. Remember, it's all about people power and the audience coming together and sharing everything we've got to keep the pressure on the Tories to make Brexit work for all of us. Thank you so much for joining us all, and we'll see you on Friday for our regular weekly Brexit Unlock with the wonderful Martin Daubney. Thank you so much. Goodbye.